So let's talk about while loops. A while loop is essentially a statement that will keep running until its condition is no longer true. So here, as you can see, with our while loop, it looks fairly similar to the same structure of a if statement. Here we specify that this is going to be a while loop, and then we check to see if some type of statement is true. And if it is, then we'll keep running whatever is in that block or anything that is indented under that block. So let me show you an example of using a while loop to perform a countdown. So this code is basically going to count down from the number that we specify or the number that we've entered. So essentially, this is how the while loop would work, okay? We're going to be checking if the number that the user entered is greater than 0. And if it is, we're going to perform whatever is indented under this while statement. So in that case, we're going to print out the number, and then we're going to reduce the number by 1. So number is now equal number minus 1. And we're going to keep doing that while number is greater than 0. And then once the number is no longer greater than 0, we're going to come outside of this while loop. So this loop is going to stop. So essentially that is how a countdown would work. So let's now run this code. First, let me provide some input. Let's say we're counting from 7. So now if I run my code, so as you can see, I get the output that I expect, which is 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So one thing that you must keep in mind when using loops is that your loops must always have an end. Because if your loop runs on forever, your device is going to run out of memory and could potentially crash. So to avoid that, we have to make sure that whatever we're checking for here, any condition that we're checking for here, would eventually be met. So for instance, let's say instead of reducing this number by 1, I forget, and instead I'm increasing by 1 here. But this condition here is always going to be checking if number is greater than 0. In this case, number would always be greater than 0 because it's counting up instead of counting down to 0. And in that case, this loop is going to keep running infinitely. And this is what we call an infinite loop. So whenever you do create a loop, ensure that the loop actually has an end. Otherwise, you will be running into some issues. So now let me show you another example of using a while loop. So in this case, we're creating some type of password checker program or authentication program, okay? And here we're asking the user to enter a password, and then we're assigning it to the variable password. And in our while loop, we're checking if the password does not equal this. And if the password does not equal these specified characters here, we're going to tell the user that the password is incorrect and they should try again. And then we'll prompt the user to enter the password again. So we're going to continue running that sequence until the password entered is actually correct, which means that this statement will no longer be true. Password does not equal these characters. So if the password actually does equal these characters, these two statements are not going to be run. And then we're just going to run the next instruction, which is to print out that the password is correct. So that's essentially how a password checker would work. So now let's try this out. I'll run my code. Okay, so now I'm prompted to enter some type of password. Let me put something that I know is wrong. Okay, now I get the message that the password is incorrect. I should try again, and then I'll enter something else. And the password is still incorrect. So now let me just try entering the correct password. And now, since the password I entered is correct, I've broken out of that loop and then printed out that the password is correct.